Good afternoon. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group with your end of day recap for Monday. And big topic I would say is, or the big news is Google. They did report earnings. They beat, but I think a couple of their line entries were kind of combed over. I think the cost per clicks was one of them. They don't have their conference call for about another half hour. I think it's 5 o'clock Eastern. So we'll see if it kind of changes. But, just from analyzing this on price alone, one of the things that kind of alarmed me a little bit is you can see this gray line that I have drawn, and I'll show you where this line comes into play. But we hit this line around 3:15 this morning. There's a big up candle at 315. It seems to be that the price touched this, and then it kind of settled in for a little while, and then right at the end of the day, even before earnings were reached, right, 15 minutes before the close, we hit this level again, which was right around 10,000. I want to say 10,005, but 1,005, and you can see this big red bar, right, which had nothing to do with the earnings, but it just seems like this is good resistance, and I'm going to show you what this line where this line comes into play. And then the first initial reaction, we hit actually a 1020 high, and then we started to float all the way back. So is this horrible? 971, from where we opened. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the story, especially for the one play that I have on. I talked about this, the option activity that we saw last week was pretty long term. I guess January isn't that long term anymore because it's not a leap. But we saw the 1040 1080 call spread. I put that trade on last week. I did not put on anything specifically for Google. I just thought, from watching Microsoft and a couple of the other names that reported earnings that were strong, and just didn't see much follow through besides Netflix, which was the beginning of the week and kind of distorted things a little bit, because I think a lot of people thought that you were going to get those type of price reactions that Netflix had after earnings, but really that was one of the few from last week that did that. For the most part, a lot of names that had good earnings, they just kind of failed to to get going, especially where the expectations are high. It's a different story for those names that aren't expecting anything, but Google's kind of, it's a bellwether name. People are expecting a good report and they're expecting the stock to go up there. So we go back to the daily chart, and this is where this line gets interesting. This is the previous high, and that's the resistance for Google. So, I think if you're in Google, you want to see the price get above here sooner than later. If we happen to turn back here in the short term, I would say your support is going to be, around this level, right where I've got the other dotted line and also this red line, which is 982, which I think we're under there, but we want to stay in here. If we start to get below here, you're going to be looking at possibly a double top that's in, and something that has to be taken out in order for the stock. So I'm not saying game over for Google, but I think you just have to be aware of that previous resistance and how we hit it while the market was open and the price didn't like it. So it seemed like a pretty good barrier there. Before they reported earnings, we hit there. So again, this could change completely in a half hour once the earnings call. Maybe they say something great and bring the stock up. But until then, watch that 10. Again, I want to say 10,005, but 1,005 level in Google. So this could also, you kind of have to always look for the silver lining with this stuff. If Amazon had a pretty nice day today, but you could see Amazon's trading down a bit. Amazon reports later in the week, so if a couple of these names kind of go down a little bit this week, maybe it'll set up nicely for a longer play and for an earnings play for Amazon. And, you have to analyze these, unfortunately, unless you're going to kind of trade into and plan on looking for a runner into earnings. A lot of people try to play use options to put in a nice risk to reward setup. So again, you have to look at this on the day that they report earnings, if that's the strategy that you're going to take. And it may completely change, because Microsoft, I think, really changed. For the week leading up to into earnings for Microsoft, it had a huge run up. So you have to account for that in the recent path of the stock price. So that's Google. Really, there are a lot of names. There's a huge amount of names that report this week, but the rest of the names that report that I think are really interesting are tomorrow morning. So besides that, we really had an uneventful day. In the overnight markets, the Hang Seng was up again. So whenever the Hang Seng is up, I think there's a pretty strong correlation between the Hang Seng and the Chinese internet stocks KWEB. This ETF is now right back to close to a 52-week high where it hit earlier last week. So this was the best performing group. The Chinese internets were up 1.1%. I'm looking on my watch list, my sector watch list. The banks did pretty well today as well. And biotech did nicely today. So biotech was really kind of the first sign today that things were kind of picking up in the afternoon. You know, these choppy days where the S&P basically does nothing all day long, I think very indicative of earnings season, and especially the days where you really have a lot of names reporting. The market just kind of wants to figure out, to kind of process this. Plus, we have an FOMC meeting, which I talked about earlier in the trading room, and just said, hey, really, if you're a portfolio manager, do you really want to do a lot of buying before you get the view of what the Fed is going to do for September and December? Not that we're really going to get that much clarification, but still, if you get a little bit of information that comes out, do you really want to go in with 2 feet when you know that you're going to get a new data point or at least a statement from the Fed that's coming out on Wednesday? So I think unless we see some type of great earnings tomorrow morning or after the close on Tuesday, I think we kind of chop. I think we see more of this. You know, I again will always look at IWM. IWM started to go down a little bit today, but I no interest in shorting right now unless I really see some levels being taken out. But we didn't take out the pre-market low. I also had my eye on the semis, which also look like they might break down. But you could see these long wicks here, meaning that there's just no momentum, really in either direction. So I did very little trading today. I tried one play in GD, and I took it off right in here. It kind of just looked like there wasn't any momentum in it, just like the overall market, and took it off. And then what was the other trade on? I put a small trade on in JD.com, considering how well these names have been reacting. I'll tell you the one name. This is like uh, one of these days where if you didn't jump in right away, I talked about putting on a long play for Baidu for possibly a run into earnings or an earnings play itself in my weekend note. And I even detailed. I said the August 4th or even the monthly, the 195,202 call spread. Looking at the weekly chart, and Baidu was up 2.8% today, up $5. So unfortunately, I did not get into this trade. You do your research on the weekends, or I do a lot of research on the weekends, and I said, okay, this play looks great, not knowing that the thing was going to be up, $5.50 today on no news. Just looks like it is trying to go here. So I still like it. It's been going sideways for a long time, but it's kind of frustrating when you're looking to go long a stock and it gaps on the open and doesn't come in, doesn't really give you a shot. So this one I'm looking at for later in the week. I'll get off this weekly chart. Apple, I think I talked about Apple pre-market, and I said that this it doesn't report this week; it reports next week. But I think could have a chance to, which it did today, took out this resistance, and I think it has a chance for the rest of the week to continue to kind of move up and to the right. So could be a runner into earnings. So I found that interesting. Option activity today was, I would say, lackluster. Just again, a lot of names that you look and they're buying options, and you look to see when they report earnings, and they are buying in a lot of these situations the very next contract that expires after their earnings date. So, do I really want to play that situation? No. I've learned over the past years to really kind of sit on your hands. If you want to try a little bit of a day trade with some of those names that you think might get a little bit of of momentum just by people calling out the calls, on the internet, on Twitter. Sure, you could do that a little bit, but really, that's for me. That's not really my style. So I kind of, for the most part, for earnings season, I do a lot less trading than, and I've talked about this quite a bit, but I just think it's choppy, and I think a lot of the trades that we see, just like I mentioned, you see calls bought and everything, they're swept, the implied volatility goes up, but you look at it could be something like the contract is August 11th, and they report on the 10th, so they're looking to capture the earnings. And I think that's justified. Like there was one for AABA today. Looked great. When does it report? It reports tomorrow after the close. So and this trade went up later in the day. Yeah, so reports tomorrow after the close. Okay, so maybe you have a 1 day trade, but really anything could happen the day of earnings. You could have some short covering, you could have some long liquidating. So it's again not my favorite thing, my cup of tea. Gold, we saw some two-way flow in. We did see a little bit of buying in the financials. Again, it strikes me as a little bit funny that we see BAC, we see Citigroup calls go up today. A lot of weekly stuff being bought. What's super sensitive on what's super sensitive for the weeks where we have the Fed announcement. Usually banks, with interest rates, right? There's a lot of interest rate implications. So if the Fed is hawkish and they want to raise interest rates more than less, it should be good for the banks, right? So I think there's a little bit of positioning for that. With both Bank of America and Citigroup, again, you just look at the volume of the weeklies, and could be that that's what they're doing. We did see a nice Yandex call buyer in the afternoon. We saw a little bit of win. The casinos acted pretty well on this SGMS number. I had SGMS on. Somebody asked me, they said, "Are you in SGMS?" And I said, I was. I took it off, I think it was at least a couple weeks ago I took it off. There was more SGMS calls last week. I just didn't put the trade on last week. So sometimes you recognize it, you think it's notable. I think it was on a couple of our trading notes and weekend notes that we put out, but I just didn't put the position on. Again, I like to trade a little bit lighter for earnings. Splunk, this is a name that keeps coming up, so I think a name to keep an eye on. And this name doesn't report, I think, till the end of August, so you got some time with this one. This one I would say probably one of the most interesting names because we've been seeing a repeat activity in this. Kind of feels like something's up in the name. Who knows? I don't know what that would be, but for the amount of calls that have gone up in the last week or so, and then we had a decent amount of put trades too, some aggressive ones. There was a decent amount of SMH puts that went up today, 34,000 November puts. So I think you want to take note of that. I don't think they were swept, but still a pretty decent block. Maybe it's a hedge. It was. It is marked when I search for sweeps. That does come up. So be mindful of more uh, SMH puts. That's been a good signal in the past. This is another one where we've got to take out the 52-week high. If not, I dare I say it, but you could be looking at a double top here. So you want to get through these previous highs, and you don't want to fail there. So for now, I think we're just consolidating. Too early to say that, but this big bar we want to have taken out, I would say, in the next couple weeks. So that's also something to watch. So I'll leave it there. Video's already been 14 minutes, so I've talked a bit. Again, a lot to process in the next couple days with earnings, so sit tight. For the most part, I'm kind of sitting on my hands and just processing the information as it comes in with earnings, and then I'll make some judgments. So that's it. That's one other name that I'm looking at, which I'll leave you with, is UAL. At the 50-day moving average, it looks like it actually broke the 50-day, the 200-day moving average. JetBlue reports tomorrow, so watch to see if this thing reclaims. I think it's a pretty decent move down here from $80 to 70 since they reported earnings, and I didn't think the earnings were that bad, so could be a little bit of an overreaction. A name that I put an alert on, something where I'm looking for a turnaround on the 200-day moving average. So I'll leave it there for the day. Have a great night. See you back tomorrow morning. Thanks.